Or you're clapping for him.
Hello, and welcome to this afternoon's Commonwealth Club World Affairs program. My name is Michael Bolden, and I'm Dean of the UC Berkeley School of Journalism. A few reminders before we get started. The program is being recorded, so we kindly ask that you silence your cell phones for the duration of our program. If you have any questions for our guest speaker, please fill them out on the cards that were on your seats or through the chat on YouTube.
Legibly.
Please. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce William Brangham. William is an award-winning PBS NewsHour journalist and host of Horizons, the weekly program that dives into science, health, technology, and environmental issues. As a correspondent, he has traveled around the world covering the climate crisis, from Antarctica to the refugee crisis in Syria. His extensive journalism career spans more than 30 years, working on documentary films and projects for ABC News, Bill Moyers, National Geographic's Explorer, and the New York Times. William, welcome home.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So nice to be here.
We're going to dive right in, and what I'd like to do first is sort of examine the state of the field of journalism. You've reported for the New York Times, Frontline, and now the NewsHour. You've seen the industry from the inside of for-profit giants and nonprofit leaders. How would you describe the state of the union for journalism in 2026? Are we in a state of evolution or a state of emergency?
Can I choose all of the above?
Yes, you can.
Okay, I'm choosing all of the above. State, to a lesser degree, one versus the other. State of emergency, I would say, in some ways, yes. I mean, we haven't seen as sort of sustained attack on the media industry more broadly, individual journalists, as we are seeing right now. And that comes everything from lawsuits to direct attacks from the most powerful office in the country. But also we are seeing newspapers and small media outlets blink out on a constant basis, and that is an emergency for this country, for people's ability to understand what is going on in their communities. If you don't have people like you used to be a long time ago, I was peppering Michael backstage, and he was an education reporter at the Times-Picayune many years ago.
We won't say how many. Okay.
Those jobs are critical. It's critical to know what is going on in your community, and those places, with the exception of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, which we just reported on the NewsHour, was saved by a local nonprofit news organization. That's the rarity. Small organizations are disappearing all over this country.
Yeah.
That is an emergency. So attacks to financial industry, the crippling of the media industry is going on, and that is a problem. Your second state of transformation, obviously we are going through that as well. I mean, we are all carrying in our pockets right now the ability to broadcast to, depending on your audience, millions of people. I mean, when I first started doing this in television, you had to have tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, get on airplanes, travel to places, expensive editing equipment, have a network, have a cable outlet. Nowadays, everyone can broadcast from their pockets, right. And a lot of people are doing it. And that is both democratizing for our industry, but it's also making it incredibly difficult to know for the average consumer where to turn. On my phone, I might look just the same as a TikToker who's telling you what they read about happening in Ukraine. How do we assess as individuals, as news consumers, when it all starts to come through and be able to be broadcast that way? So incredible transformation and a state of emergency.
So that's a fascinating insight that you have there, and I wonder how at PBS are you all beginning to help with that shift? Are there things that you're taking in terms of helping audiences distinguish? Are you adapting at all to trying to reach audiences in new ways? Is that something that you're doing?
We try this all the time, and we struggle with this all the time. Sarah Just, our executive producer, a wonderful newsroom leader, is here with us today. She is the person that first hired me to come work at the NewsHour and has been spearheading a lot of our efforts in this regard. And yes, we're trying everything we can under the sun to try to reach new audiences because, I mean, let's be honest, not everyone has the opportunity to go home at 6 o'clock at night
Yes.
and turn on that square thing in their living room and watch an hour of news. And so a lot of people do, and that is still the bulk of our audience. But we are trying all sorts of ways to reach other audiences, to carve up our broadcast and put it on all sorts of different channels. I mean, TikTok, X, Instagram, YouTube, we are pushing it out in every way we possibly can because there are millions of audiences out there who are looking for different ways of absorbing this. And we also, as you were asking, try to help our audience understand how this ecosystem is evolving as well. So we do a lot of reporting on the NewsHour about what it, like, for instance, I recently did a story about what's called AI slop, which is just this ocean. You've all seen, I guarantee you many of you have seen some of it today, coursing through our phones and social media, completely fake generated imagery that purports to be things that it is not. Sometimes it's just kittens dancing on the head of a Frisbee. That's great. A lot of times it is not, and sometimes it can be used to deceive, oftentimes. And, you know, trying to help our audiences, as we are doing ourselves, to recognize this evolving world, and here's what's coming at you, here's how to try to be a little bit more literate. I'm sure this is the same thing you guys do at Berkeley all the time, is how to not just train journalists,
Right.
but how to teach people to understand this torrent coming through and to discern fact from fiction.
Well, it's a very interesting time because we've had information be democratized, right? I mean,
Which is a wonderful thing.
right, exactly, because we have voices that are being heard that weren't heard before. We can reach more people, but at the same time, we have all of this tension and all this competition, this cacophony of noise that we didn't have before.
Right.
And it makes your job harder and my job harder.
Right.
So,
I mean, one of the things that, speaking of the democratization, in a very, very basic way, the pandemic, when we all became comfortable talking into our computers and having people beaming out from their living rooms, that in a small way democratized the numbers of people who appear on the NewsHour. Because before, a lot of news organizations had a bias to having someone who could appear in person in a studio or go to a studio in San Francisco or in Seattle or in Oklahoma City or wherever. But now that we are much more comfortable with people talking from their homes, the breadth and depth across the economic spectrum, the racial spectrum, the geographic spectrum, that is also democratized. The numbers of voices and the different kinds of people we hear from on our broadcast, and I know this is true elsewhere, has really gone up. And that's, again, another one of these little things that is a net positive.
you know, that's great. But so the other shift that we've seen, and you mentioned this actually in one of your first answers, is in how news is funded, right? You know, as a dean, I see students, they're entering a market where traditional papers of record are shrinking, right? I mean, I worked at the Washington Post for 14 years, and I'm sure everyone in our audience has heard about what happened there recently. So is the nonprofit member-supported model we see at PBS, and that you mentioned what's happening in Pittsburgh, is that the sustainable future for hard news?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think public media should and ought to be funded. I think that there is absolutely a place in our society where the government could carve out a small amount of money to insulate an organization from commercial pressures. But newspapers, other television broadcasters, other video and other journalistic institutions do have to reach out and find new ways. The nonprofit model sometimes works. It is really a conundrum, and it's something that I thankfully don't have to deal with, and my colleagues here have to struggle with this much more than I do. But it is a real challenge going forward because we as a society benefit enormously from smart, thoughtful journalism. And if AI is simply cannibalizing all of the research and reporting and writing and news gathering that we all do, they're going to put us out of business, and there will be nothing in that industry going forward to be reporting on. I mean, I guarantee if you go to Google right now and you type in, what happened in Ukraine recently, or what happened in the peace talks with Lebanon and Israel, very likely Google's Gemini, the AI synopsis, is going to show you likely something that the NewsHour reported on.
Right.
That is something that we paid for. That is something that our colleagues put themselves in harm's way to gather, to bring to us. If you can simply get that synopsized for you in a 2-sentence little bit of business,
Right.
that in the end works for you today, does not work 6 months from now or 6 years because we can't sustain ourselves.
Well, and so it used to be that when you Googled something, you would actually get links. So you
Right.
might get links to a NewsHour report or
Right.
to the Washington Post, and now you just get that summary,
Right.
which may or may not be accurate.
Right.
So
I've been finding, I was just doing some research recently on something, and the link tells you, it's saying, oh, here's how to fix something on your pickup truck, and you follow the link to it, and it's not accurate.
Yeah.
The link is not demonstrating what it says it's demonstrating. I mean, that's just brave new world we live in.
yeah. Well, and one of the problems I think that results from that, right, is this gap that we have in trust. We have a problem where people don't trust media like they used to. They don't trust institutions like they used to. With the political polarization, truth itself feels like contested territory. At the NewsHour, how do you keep your impartial North Star when even reporting the facts is often labeled as a partisan act?
You just have to take those arrows as they come in and do your job and do the reporting and call it as you see it. We have a new White House correspondent, Liz Landers, who has come onto the NewsHour and done an incredible job. And she has been one of those reporters who has been the subject of the president overtly pointing at her and saying, you're a rotten reporter. And you just have to do it. She was actually fact-checking him about some of his election denial claims about the 2020 election. She said, but your own attorney general said that there was no fraud that had any bearing on this election whatsoever. You're a rotten reporter. That's just what you have to do if you are in this business. And we collectively, she individually, and all of us think that our job is simply to do our jobs. And if we get something wrong, we will correct the record. But we are not setting out with an agenda here. We are setting out to try to understand the world around us and help our audience understand, as best we can discern, what on earth is going on and tell it accurately. And okay, we're going to get attacked for that. That just comes with the territory, more so now than.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question that I will admit is unfair. But so in this situation,
You're a rotten reporter.
Well, and that's not the first time I've been told that either. But in those situations, right, when someone gets attacked, let's say in the White House press room or in the Pentagon press room, and they get called out or they get called a name, what do you think the rest of the press corps should do in that moment?
It's very easy for me. I've never covered the White House. I've never been in that big scrum where all the cameras, when the most powerful man on earth is there barking at one of your colleagues. I think, and again, this is my personal opinion on this, I do believe that if the president were to call you out and to say you're a rotten reporter, I would want the next person who asks the question to say, Michael is not a rotten reporter. He was simply following up with a fact. Could you please answer that, sir? And I would like that to go around the room continuously. Again, these are competing news organizations, often from sometimes very ideologically different organizations.
Yes.
Everyone has their own question that they want to ask about sometimes a very different topic. I would personally love to see a little more solidarity.
Yeah, I would too, actually, and I think that that's a challenge for the entire industry.
It's easy for me to say this too because I've not been in that position.
Yeah, and I haven't either, but I'd like to think that as a reporter and editor that I would stand up for my colleagues. But again, until we're actually in that situation, who knows what we would do. One of the cornerstones of your career really has been handling complex, even existential topics. And you host Horizons, where you cover the cutting edge of science. Science is often nonlinear and messy. It's one of those areas, too, where there's polarization and trust issues. How do you report on evolving science, like a new pandemic or a climate breakthrough, to a public that is hungry for definitive black and white answers, and when it's contested, they've been taught not to trust it?
That's an enormous challenge, and it's been one of the most thrilling parts about embarking on this new show. Again, thanks to Sarah Just and our colleagues. This is one of the programs that came out of some of the more severe budget cuts that we suffered through, where we had to lose our weekend news program, which has been incredibly painful, especially now as news has been seemingly coming fast and furious on the weekends. I love covering these topics, science in particular, and simply taking complicated ideas and trying to both distill them down in the way that I talk about them, but also then finding the people who are most able to communicate those things. There's nothing that makes me happier and more excited about this type of work. It's like that, it's teaching in some way,
Yes.
trying to explain very arcane things. And I've been covering a lot of these, especially the climate crisis, for decades. And it's very hard to find scientists oftentimes who will talk about some of these things in a way that a lay audience can understand. And that's always the challenge, is to find people who can communicate in a way that they're not dumbing it down, but in a way that is still understandable. Because I've sat with so many scientists over the years, and they talk about their work, and they are passionate about their work, and it is impossible to follow. And that's very difficult. That makes for terrible television, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I put people like that on. So, but to address this issue of how you deal, again, with people who say, that guy's talking about the efficacy of vaccines, that's not real. Again, we bat down myths when they become a big enough story that we want to take on the myths. During the COVID pandemic, we talked about how Bill Gates was not, in fact, microchipping people through a vaccine. When those things rise up enough, I mean, it sounds insane, but there is a level of excitable paranoia in this country, and those things have to be addressed sometimes, just so people have another way of saying, okay, the NewsHour covered this. If I hear this question, I know where to go, and I can find a nice précis about why that's not real. But again, you simply try to convey the truth as best you and the people who are expert in this can convey it and understand it themselves, and that's what you present. That's what you do.
So, and you've become yourself quite an authority on any number of topics.
I wouldn't go that far.
Well, but I think that's accurate. I think a lot of people in the audience would think that's accurate as well. How do you avoid falling into what could be a trap where your understanding of things is beyond what your audience understands, right? And you might fall into the trap of
Sounding like
things
one
the
of
way
those
that,
stuffy experts.
Exactly, right?
We talk about this all the time in our editorial gatherings. For many years, when we were covering climate change in particular, I would always say, do I need to explain the greenhouse effect? Like, we talk about greenhouse gases. Everybody knows what those are now. But the greenhouse effect, what is actually the way in which those gases go up in the atmosphere and create a greenhouse-like effect of not letting heat leave the surface of the Earth, for a long time we kept asking ourselves, do we need to say that? Do we know what our audience understands? And it's a constant evolving. On some level, we know that our audience is a smart, educated audience. So on some level, you can start to understand that they are going to get this. You don't have to go back to basics every single time, but it's a constant check that we do on ourselves to say, do people know what that term means? Do I need to parenthetically interrupt this person to say, oh, that's what that actually means, what mRNA means when you're talking about vaccines? And we're juggling that constantly.
Okay. And so climate was one of the issues that we've talked about. You've clearly helped make the NewsHour a leader in climate coverage. How do you structure those stories so that, and this isn't just about the depth of information, but so how do you structure the story so that the audience stays engaged rather than falling into climate doom or apathy, because these problems are so gargantuan?
They are, and that is a constant challenge, how to find a way to not make people turn the channel.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they're going to talk about the glaciers melting again. A lot of times the reporting you have to do to explain sometimes the very brass tack consequences to individuals of what it would mean. Okay, if a glacier melts in Antarctica, that's one thing. Almost no one on Earth has actually been, very, very few people as a percentage of our population have ever been to Antarctica. How do you convey to them what it actually means if the Thwaites Glacier were to slip into the ocean? And that means things for people who live in the Bay Area and in Miami and in Bangladesh and in communities all over the world. So it's constant trying to help people understand the real world implications of this. I mean, simply the impacts of air pollution, burning coal and oil and gas, and the numbers of people who die prematurely because they're breathing in polluted air all over the world is, even if you cared nothing about sea level rise or climate change or anything like that, simply knowing that that pollution shortens hundreds of thousands of people's lives every single year is the kind of thing you try to help people understand. Like, what is the connection between the cars we drive, the life that we live, and the downstream consequences for others and ourselves.
Well, and to that point, so how do you avoid falling into the same trap, right? I mean, because you report these things and you understand them more deeply than the audience probably will. And that can be a very intimidating and discouraging thing on some level.
Yeah, we try. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. If you understand the consequences of some of these things, the projections are not great. It's sometimes hard to get despondent about it. But, for instance, this last week's episode of Horizons, we reported what I think is one of the most hopeful aspects, which is the renewable energy revolution that we are going through right now. And so we had two people on who have been longtime evangelists for wind and solar, and rather than being seen as sort of this alternative niche, as one of our guests, Bill McKibben, the wonderful environmental writer and activist, said it used to be considered sort of the Whole Foods of energy, that was nice, expensive, but nice for some people. It is now the Costco of energy. It is the cheapest, in bulk, on the shelf, ready to go. And that is the truth that is happening in this country. I mean, the state of California right now, these lights and all of the equipment that is broadcasting us out, the majority of the energy is coming from renewable sources. And when the sun goes down at night, the majority of your energy is also coming from batteries that store away all that energy for when it's dark. A lot of people don't know that. So again, this is an example of trying to find a way to help convey that there is hope in all of this, that it's not all doom. I'll give you a good dose of doom, but I'll also try to remind you that it's not.
We appreciate that. So let's shift a little bit and talk about some of your award-winning reporting on health and the opioid crisis. When you're telling those stories, you have to gain the trust of people at their most vulnerable. What is the journalist's responsibility to the subject once the camera turns off?
It's a very difficult thing because oftentimes what we do as journalists, if I'm not reporting in my own hometown or city, is you get on a plane and you fly somewhere, and usually your producers or colleagues have isolated a community or a treatment center or a family that has suffered some tragedy. And then you're kind of parachuting in and suddenly sitting in the living room with someone who might have lost a child or might be struggling with an addiction themselves or gun violence. I mean, you can just imagine the tragedies, the kinds of things that we cover. And you are suddenly in this position of having an incredibly intimate conversation with someone that you just met maybe an hour ago, if you're lucky to have time to sit and try to get to know them and to talk with them. And it is one of the most, it's a beautiful thing, that level of intimacy. It is also, I feel, an incredible honor to be allowed and welcomed into a person's home and that they will answer questions from me about these things when you are literally just showed up at their door and now you are talking about the loss of a child or something like that. And it's it takes a lot to do it, and I think to do it well, and those of us that have the privilege of doing this hold that preciously, and we know that to not be parasitic about it, to not be exploitative about that if someone says to you, I have to stop, or I know you came all this way, but I don't think I can actually do this today. Those things have all happened to me.
Yeah.
You say yes, and you say of course, and you quietly get up and go. The people who do engage in those conversations, what we owe them after the fact is for them to see the end result of what you did with them, how you gathered that material, how you edited it, how you spoke about them, how you showed them to the world in oftentimes what is the worst moments, recounting some of the worst parts of their life. If they feel that you respected them and treated them fairly, I think, that's success as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and there's a larger success too, right? Because when we look at a lot of your work, there are themes and buckets where you've taken people on a journey through things like the pandemic, through the opioid crisis, through climate change, and all of it is building toward something, maybe a resolution, maybe answers, something. I mean, that has to be something that I think would sustain people you interview and also sustain you.
It does. I mean, it is, as I was saying, it is an incredible privilege to do this job because I do get license to go to places and to talk with people who I would normally never get to do. It is an incredible, it's the best part of being a journalist, that people open their doors to you. You call people up and you say, I'm with the PBS NewsHour. It helps when you're calling from the PBS NewsHour, of course. I worked also on National Geographic projects years ago. That was the only other organization that similarly opened. Like, you're at Nat Geo, great, come on over, like anything. It's just, it is an organization that opens doors. So you come with a level of trust and people expect, if they know of you, they expect and know that you will treat them fairly. But it is a beautiful gift to be welcomed in and to have people share their lives in whatever realm that is. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So is there a story, a situation, a person that when you think about the stories that you've done, that really stays with you and you think, this is why I'm in this business?
There are so many.
Yeah.
Just one of the most recent ones. Again, this is another example of the family originally from Texas. They have a trans daughter. And my colleagues had filmed with this family. I hadn't worked on that story, but filmed with them twice before when they were wrestling with both how they were going to deal with their child transitioning. And then also the overlay of that is that Texas became increasingly hostile towards passing laws. The school environment changed quite a bit, and so they moved to Colorado. They said, we can't do this anymore. To protect our daughter, we're going to come and move to another state. And again, this is one of those things where I fly from New York to Colorado. Lovely to meet you. Again, I had seen these two stories about them, and I had heard and talked with them on the phone before I got there, but still, I am now sitting in the living room with this family, and they were anonymous. They didn't want, because they're trying to protect their child, off camera, but so cameras on their hands and their feet and behind them and looking at me. And as we're talking, their daughter describes being in her new school and how, for the first time, she felt like, I'm just here and people accept me for who I am. And there'll be an essay in class and there'll be a gay kid in the class and no one titters. No one looks at me and points funnily at me. And she said, I finally feel like I'm in a place where I belong. And her mom starts sobbing and grabs her hand and says, honey, I didn't know that was how you were feeling. And again, it was just one of these things where, because they are open to talking about these very intimate things with a stranger, you get to be part of an incredibly precious and beautiful moment. And that kind of thing happens all the time. Again, that's a particularly emotional one, but there are those experiences that we have, and it's what I was describing before of why I love this work so much, is that you get to, you get licensed to ask questions, and people oftentimes will answer them.
Right. It's a true honor when that happens.
It's amazing.
So, most of us in the room, we have young people in our lives. Maybe they're our kids, maybe they're our grandkids. Some of you may be educators. You yourself were an adjunct at Columbia for a short while. And I'm a dean. I think about what we're telling students and young people all the time. So if you were sitting in one of my seminars for freshmen and you were talking to my students, what would you tell them is the most vital skill to learn? Is it the old school shoe leather reporting, or has data literacy and AI fluency become the new baseline?
I still think that the most important skill is to be a good writer. Writing well helps you think. You can't write well if you're not being truly thoughtful about what you're trying to convey. That means you're also a good listener.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, it doesn't always correlate. I would also argue that speaking and communicating is incredibly important as well. But writing, if I had to distill it down to one thing, I would say that working on your writing and being a good writer, crisp and clear, and communicating what you're trying to communicate as simply and straightforwardly as possible, that's what I'd tell them.
Well, that answer may surprise some people because they're like, but wait, you're on the camera. You don't have to worry about the writing. But of course, that's very much a part of your job. So.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Here at Berkeley, the Academy in general, they value deep, slow thought. The news cycle is instantaneous. You see it every day. How do we teach students, and I think this is also a lesson for people who are consumers of news, to maintain their ethical integrity when the pressure to be first is so immense, whether we're talking about being first on social, being the first on broadcast, being the first on a website?
We have the luxury at the NewsHour that we only have 1 hour a night. I mean, if something breaks, one of us will often do things for our digital outlets. We'll do a quick explainer about what does it mean that Trump just said he's going to close this environmental center in Colorado. What does that mean? Like, I'll talk to the camera for 2 minutes and we'll put that out before, we won't wait till the 6 p.m. NewsHour airs. But we do have the luxury of not having to do this. I mean, some of my colleagues, Lisa Desjardins in particular, is often breaking news because she's on Capitol Hill and knows everyone and is adored by everyone. And so she's often getting scoops quickly and she bangs them out on Twitter, on X. And so there is that, but there is a very well-established, if one of us has a source, we'll go to the boss and say, hey, this is a source. Do you think this is a legitimate person? Can I actually cite this person as an unnamed source for this story? So there's a check on that. But again, we're not 24-hour news, thankfully. I mean, that's a different metabolism. That's a different skill set. But no, we're even in the middle of our broadcast. News breaks all the time, and we have to be making a judgment call. Do we put this at the back of the show? Do we push something else out? Do we try to, do we lift this whole segment out and then now we have to fill 7 minutes? Is this worthy of that for the broadcast? Like when news is breaking, we are constantly making that judgment call. But thankfully, for the most part, we only have to do that in a somewhat constrained window.
So do the audience a favor and sort of take them behind the scenes a little bit and tell them how that hour comes together, what goes into it, how do you put it together, how do you make those decisions? People in the profession, we sort of sometimes think people know how this works, and they don't.
Right.
So take us behind the scenes.
9 o'clock in the morning, we have a meeting, and it's a company-wide meeting. Sarah has been very great about encouraging everyone to be in on that and to participate in that. And we go around and sort of the different beat heads, so our foreign head, our politics head, our national affairs head, and then our news director, the person who assembles what we call the news summary, often at the top of the show. Today in Lebanon, today in Tacoma, Washington. All 4 of those people will give a quick recap of the things that they think are worthy of doing in the broadcast that night. And then we have it out. Some of the things that we will talk about, so it'll be a debate. Do we do a conversation about this new healthcare law? Does that rise above the conversation that our foreign senior producer is pitching about Syria and the new Syrian leader? I'm just making topics up here. But it is a constant process of building, sort of like cooking a meal, that you've got these different constituent parts. Everyone is coming to the table offering their offerings for the table. And then we go through the process of saying, okay, let's definitely start with that. Then we ought to do this. But if the senator will show up and be at the camera on time, we will do him. If he doesn't, then maybe we will do that healthcare conversation. But remember, 3 weeks ago, we also commissioned that story out of Lebanon. Yeah. That's been filmed and has been edited, and that's ready to go, and that can't sit on the shelf. That's the term of, you can't put it on the shelf, you need to have it because it's going to get old. So it's a constant and ever-evolving process. So after that 9 o'clock meeting, we think we have the rough contours of a show, but it often changes during the course of the day because news breaks. The world seems like it is accelerating. It's not just me, I hope, that feels that way. It is
every day, every hour, every minute, right?
Right. So things will happen during the course of the day, and then we have to decide, okay, which of those component chunks gets pulled out, what replaces it, and it's a constant evolving process. And it sometimes goes right up until we start air, 6 o'clock.
Which part do you enjoy the most?
I love the part I was describing before, which is traveling, telling stories out in the field. I also do, this new program I've been doing, I adore that as well, simply because it's a 30-minute broadcast and we talk about one topic for the entire show. And that, the News Hour is a rarity in television to have. We do 6, 7, 8-minute long conversations. We do tape pieces that are sometimes 10, 12 minutes long. Judy Woodruff's recent series are these wonderful long pieces looking at where we are in American society right now. That is very, very rare in television news. And yet, I sometimes think 7 minutes wasn't enough to have that conversation. We barely scratched the surface. And so then to get 30 minutes to talk about something is incredible treat as well.
Okay. So actually, I think this is a good time. There's a question from the audience that I think fits in here. All of these different skills that you're bringing to bear and that you're putting to use, is there a skill set that you wish you had when you started your journalism career?
I still, you have to be good at talking to strangers, and I've gotten better as I've gone along because going up to someone, inevitably we do election stories, and I'll be in Florida, and you have to stand outside an election booth and talk to every single person that comes out. Hey, did you vote today? That makes me incredibly uncomfortable, still to this day. And it is a really valuable skill to be able to go up to complete strangers and have the majority of them say, I'm not going to talk to you, and move along. So I wish I had been better at that. My wife would say, my God, you never stop talking to the Uber drivers and you're talking to strangers constantly. What do you mean you have a hard time with it? I still do often have a hard time approaching people cold. And it is calling people cold and approaching them in person cold is a critical part of reporting. And there's a little bit of me that's like,
So how do you psych yourself up for it? Is there a little talk that you give yourself, or what do? You just dive in?
Yeah, you just start to do it.
Okay.
I wish there was a secret I could share with you and your students, but some people have it.
So for the people who are in the room, we've talked about misinformation, we've talked about AI slop. If they're wondering, what does a healthy news diet look like in 2026? What advice can you give them?
Broccoli. A healthy news diet is whatever is not giving you a coronary, I would argue. And so only you know what that is going to be. And sometimes your spouse might tell you, put the phone down because my mother-in-law, adore her to death, but she is a manic news consumer, and it's not healthy. She's incredibly educated and knows everything about everything, but I think it's going to put her in an early grave because it can be too much. So I think it is important, obviously, for people to watch the PBS NewsHour every single night from 6 to 7. That's a healthy news diet. No, we do think about, okay, if you only are going to have an hour, we do think about our broadcast. We know that our audience is not doing that they are absorbing lots of different sources, and that's part of the healthy diet. But it is to be done in balance, I would argue, because an informed citizenry is critical. Obviously, we all believe that, but there can be overload. A constant cable news on the wall is not healthy, I would argue.
What does your news diet look like? And of course, this is also recognizing you have to do all kinds of things, read all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's not a healthy diet, I would argue.
Yeah.
Simply because you do want to know what all sorts of different organizations are reporting on, writing on, different ideological streams. Like I have lots of different, I'll jump through the cable news channels. My Twitter feed is a very different, I try to get a lot of different voices in there. So again, it's part of what we do professionally, that we have to be cognizant of what other people are reporting on and how people are framing things. And
Yeah. Well, but one of the things that I'm seeing, and you probably have seen this some too, is that we know that the burnout rate for young journalists is high because they are taking in all of this stuff, right? Especially when we're talking about the heavy beats like, climate change and some of the others. How do we build professional resilience, which you obviously have acquired over your decades of experience, but how do we build that in our young journalists who are coming behind you and me to sort of take the mantle?
I think we have to be honest with them to say that there will be times in both the pace of what we have to do and sometimes the demands that we put on journalists to produce quickly and at all hours can be exhausting, and that you have to recognize that can be too much. It's fine in spurts and it's fine for certain sustained periods, but there have to be respites. But there also have to be emotional respites that you have to recognize and talk openly with young reporters. Everyone thinks, everyone's a swashbuckling war correspondent. You can go do all this stuff and you're fine and none of it bothers you or gets under your skin. It's not true at all. And pretending that is a real archetype, there's a few individuals out there and they make movies about them. It's not a great way to live your life. And you will end up with emotional wreckage if you are that way. So talking with reporters about, you just came out of covering this mass shooting and you've just been with people who have all experienced this collective trauma. It's not to make this about us, to say that anything what we went through is like what they have gone through, but it is still something that takes something out of you. And if you don't talk to reporters about that, and to say, especially to younger journalists, it's okay to be mortified about what you just experienced. It's okay to be depressed about this. You might not feel this for a couple of days, but when you come back, when you are back home, be aware that this is what it might look like. Yeah. You might suddenly be flying off the handle 3 days from now and not make the connection that, oh, you just came from this event and now it is manifesting itself this way. So having newsroom leaders that talk about this and that recognize that this is a real thing, I think is the way you keep people alive and sustained and thriving in this business.
So how do you find your respite?
I find it with my family. I find it at home. I find it taking long walks, reading. Reading is, things that are not news related, which is very hard to do. Because
what do you like to read?
I read a ton for work because it's oftentimes you're going to interview this author, and I just do not want to be the person who did not read the book.
Right.
That's just terrible. I did it once. I'm not going to.
Who was the author?
I cannot say. Very well-known author. I was given this. Someone else was going to do the book, but then he got switched to me 2 days before it. The book was like this thick, and two of my colleagues we had 2 copies. They tore it in half. She read the first half, the other colleague read the second half, and then they both basically just did a deep distillation for me of here's what happened. And then the guy came in, we did the interview, wonderful book. Again, I can't say because I'm not going to tell you the book. But afterwards, he said, it's so great that you actually read the book. And I just felt like, if you actually knew. We did him again, and I read the whole book, and I felt very proud of myself.
Oh, that's great. That's great. We've covered a lot of territory. What would you say, what's the best part of your job and what's the most challenging part of your job?
I mean, the best part of my job we've talked about, which is that the breadth and depth and the expanse of what we get to do and that we get paid to do. I mean, I got paid to go to Iran years ago. I got paid to go to Antarctica. I get paid to go to all over this country and abroad to report on things that really matter to me and I think to our society. And that is incredible privilege that I will never, ever forget about. The second part of your question was what? What do I love most about it?
Yes. What did you find challenging?
Oh, most challenging.
Yeah.
I found, frankly, knowing what to focus on and what to push aside has been a huge challenge. I also personally, and this is a little idiosyncratic, I found being on camera to be very uncomfortable. Like I didn't intend to be a person that did this. I came up as a producer and a shooter and an editor. And so I never wanted to be a guy who's on camera. And I was, I think, awful at it for a very long time. And Sarah Just was very gracious to let me learn on the job in this regard. But that was very uncomfortable. I really did not like that part. I was fine with having my voice narrating pieces, but that made it very uncomfortable.
Well, so share a little bit more about your journey. How did you, first of all, become interested in journalism and media, and then the transition that you made from being a person who's behind the camera to being the person who's in front of the camera?
I was sure that I was going to go to film school and be a cinematographer or a director, and that's what my plan was. And then I got a job writing press releases for Bill Moyers in 1991. I was living in Los Angeles. I was going to go to the American Film Institute. I had my career all mapped out. And then I got this job, and I had read some of his work and seen some of his work on television and loved it. And I thought, oh, they're going to hire me to move to New York. I'll go do that and give that a shot. And that's where I completely gave up on the idea of going to film school. He was working on a documentary at the time about returning, I think it was Iraq War veterans. No, it wasn't the Iraq War yet. Anyway, and I remember seeing one of these documentaries being put together, and I just thought, this is an incredible way of telling stories. It's different from fiction and filmmaking, but it's filmmaking and storytelling of a different kind. And so that's when I changed over to doing that kind of work. And then it was over many years working for Moyers and different projects where Moyers was the first one who said to me, when you go out and film a piece, oftentimes in the old days, you would edit it together and the producer would record what's called scratch narration, which is just here's what the narrator will say. They record that, and the editor then cuts in the producer's voice until the correspondent can come and give you the final narration. And I had done this story with Moyers, and I had recorded my voice, and he said, you have a great voice. You should just narrate this piece. You did all the reporting. I didn't even go on this trip. You should just do it yourself. And I was like mortified, like, oh my God, okay, I'm very serious. And so I did that, and it turned out fine. And then later he was like, okay, a couple stories later, he was like, now you're going to do it for real, and we're going to put a camera on you as well, and you're going to have to become the guy to talk on camera. And that was the whole, started doing some of that. And then I stayed being a producer for years and would sort of do that occasionally, but it wasn't until I came to the NewsHour that I started doing this full time and kind of gave up a large amount of producing fully. So
did Bill Moyers give you any advice that still sticks with you today?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I bet there's a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. One of them was a few times early on, I would substitute anchor at the NewsHour. And after one of these, Moyers called me up and basically chewed me out to say, not chewing me out, but he said, you're looks like you're trying to be a news anchor as opposed to letting yourself come through a little bit more. And it doesn't look right, it feels stiff, it feels awkward. And you have to find a way to let some of yourself come through. Otherwise, you're never going to be good at this job because it is an artificial experience. You're standing in front of a camera pretending that that glass and plastic box at the other end of the room is a million something people or whatever. And that advice, the idea that you have to, again, nobody wants to hear stories about my dog on the news hour, but finding a way to let your own humanity come through, I took that to heart and I tried to do that. Again, I'm not sure I still get there, but.
Oh, I think that your audience would say you absolutely do that every single day. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
So, you've witnessed so many tough challenges that society is facing, and you continue to do it, and you will continue to do it. What is the one thing about the future of the American press that still makes you optimistic?
The fact that you're telling me that young people are knocking down your doors trying to be journalists.
Yeah.
We were just talking about this before we came out. I love that. I mean, I love that there is still a hunger for this, that there is still an interest in this. This is probably a self-selecting group of individuals, but we are all interested and care about the health of our democracy. And a lot of that, I think, comes from a free and spirited and feisty press. And so knowing that there is a new generation that is coming up, when all signs should be telling them,
Yeah.
try something else, young man, young woman, it heartens me greatly.
Yeah, well, what I told him was that we actually are probably going to have a record incoming class at the Graduate School of Journalism this coming fall. So,
That gives me hope. I love that.
It's one of the things that keeps me going in my job, right, is that these people are running toward the profession at a time when you'd think they'd be running away.
Right,
So
exactly.
that's great. So one of our questions from the audience, this is interesting. Do you have a dream interviewee? Who would that be, and what would you ask them?
I know I should have an answer for this.
Uh-oh.
Boy, I don't know. I could come up with a million different names. The interviews that I have done that resonate the most with me are like the ones that I was describing before. Like I want to interview the president. I would love to talk to Volodymyr Zelensky or Jose Andres, or all of the the people that we can think of that are titanic figures in one way or another in our society. But the people, the everyday people who you get to spend time with, who are doing remarkable things with their lives, those are the interviews that I love the most. People who are, I should probably have a better answer for this but that's what I would say, is that it's not an individual person. It is the quieter people who are not looking for the limelight, who don't live in the limelight, that I find the most gratifying and moving experiences as a reporter.
Okay, so now I'm curious though. So if you looked backward, is there a historical figure that you might like to interview if you had the chance?
Well, yeah, Jesus Christ would be great.
Well, 1600 Pennsylvania
Yes.
Avenue. Well,
I love those glowing hands.
I know, right? So, yeah.
You're right. He's right there.
Yeah. Well, and interestingly, someone in the audience asked, so if you had the chance to interview our current president / Jesus, what would you ask him? So,
everyone that tries to talk to the president and that does talk to the president, it's a very complicated conversation because it's very hard to pin the man down, and he is masterful at taking whatever you've asked him and simply moving it to whatever island he would like to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's often circular and circuitous, the weave as he refers to it as. So I don't think it's actually that productive. I think there are a lot of reporters that have done good jobs in conversation with him. I mean, there are times that I would like to really know if he really does think that, say, the 2020 election was stolen from
Yes.
him, or is he just saying that? There are, all sorts of. Did he really think that the Iran war would not turn out the way that it has turned out, and potentially, threatening to crater our economy? There are certain things where I just would love to know, but it's just hard to know you're going to get a straight, true answer out of him.
Yeah. So how have you seen in the time that you've been, let's say the last decade, has journalism changed in trying to cover this administration and the issues that arise, or has journalism stayed constant?
I mean, I think it has been evolving.
Yeah.
I think from the first Trump administration to the second Trump administration is just a different animal altogether. I mean, I think there were, as we have all read and we've reported extensively, he came in maybe not even thinking he was going to win that race, and had to sort of take on an institution of the Republican Party and the Republican Party apparatus to fill his White House. And a lot of those people, we have subsequently learned, provided guardrails and checks and deterred him from certain things and steered him in other ways. This time is a very different thing, and I'm not sure we've fully gotten our arms around the number of ways in which this administration is just acting very, very differently than that. I mean, we cover it all the time. We cover it every single night on the NewsHour. But again, this is a very different administration, and its understanding of the levers of power and the way money works and the way a Republican Congress will or will not stand up to the president. I mean, it's an incredible thing to witness, the way in which this president has exerted power. It's an extraordinary thing, and history will be talking about this for decades and decades. I do think, I mean, I know this because I read about it in the press, and my colleagues and I all cover this in different ways. So I do think that we are covering it in a slightly different way. I don't know if that is changing necessarily the outcomes, or if they are. I think the audience, I mean, our collective audience for the media understands what is going on, and maybe they act in a certain way. Maybe his supporters love it. Maybe his detractors see this as evidence why they want to vote him out. So on some level, yes, we are covering it and we are aware of it. But it is still just it's like watching a comet go by. It's an incredible force of nature that we are living through right now.
So, I mean, you're so well read. I mean, do you see a difference between how we cover what's happening here in the United States and how people in the foreign press present what's happening in the United States to their own audiences?
That is the one part of my reading that I don't really cover very much. Like, I don't really know how the Italians or the French or the English or the Australians or the Turks are covering. You hear it sometimes just because I watch all of those gaggles where the president has the big cadre of reporters, and sometimes there's foreign press reporters. I covered Trump's last trial in New York quite a bit, and I spent some time with a couple of French reporters, and they were much more open about and able to write about in a much more colorful, pointed way, just because of the organizations that they worked for, about how he would comport himself and what those trials were really all about. But I'm not sure totally how the foreign press is covering him.
Yeah. Do you feel constrained at all, or is there a way that you might cover something differently if you weren't at PBS?
I don't know. I mean, we care deeply about not wearing our opinions on our sleeve. It is a core principle that we care about and uphold every single day. It doesn't mean that you don't have judgment and that your judgment is not brought to bear on your reporting, but you're trying not to show your opinions, because what I care about X, the way in which you know what I care about is the things that I repeatedly keep coming back to as a reporter. And I think every reporter, you can look at their career and say, they keep coming back to these issues, those things matter to them. That's different than having an opinion on how one thing ought to go versus another. But I think if I was not at the NewsHour, I mean, I might scream aloud on Twitter a little bit more than I do,
Yeah.
because I'd get sacked for it. But no, I think journalistically, I mean, I worked for Bill Moyers for many years, and Moyers was criticized heavily for speaking his mind very overtly. That was what he did. He treated himself as a commentator. He also called himself a journalist, and it got him into trouble because he didn't always adhere to journalistic standards. He was always speaking the facts and the truth as he saw them, but he was also doing it from a very pointed point of view. We really try not to do that. And I think it makes us better for it. You make better arguments when you hear what both sides have to say. And you might come to a middle ground conclusion on that, but I think it's, in the end, you don't want to hear my opinions.
Yeah. Well, something we were talking about in the green room, how do you deal with the criticism that will inevitably come your way, right? It's just part of the territory. How do you deal with those?
You just deal with it. I mean, it is a fact of life that we live through, and you can't really let it guide how you cover things. You can't be constantly expecting that, oh, we're going to get hammered if we do this, or if we have that guest on. Again, we do struggle because of the partisanship of the media and the partisanship of our society right now. It is often very difficult to get people from, particularly the Republican Party. We have a difficult time getting people who will often come on because they've been told that the media is biased. And so we strain constantly to try to hear from all sides. And sometimes when they don't agree to come on, we will say, just for the record, we put out requests to 5 senators on this committee to speak with us, and they chose not to respond. But that is part of what makes it difficult to present both sides if both sides don't want to come and talk about it.
Well, it makes it even more difficult because sometimes, I mean, there are multiple sides sometimes, right?
Sure.
All the nuance.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting question from someone in our audience, which sort of goes to this point. So this questioner asks, why has Tucker Carlson conducted more hard-hitting interviews of some of our elected officials than anything I've seen on PBS or other mainstream media?
Well, I would take issue with that. I think that my colleagues have done. I would put up some of our harder-hitting interviews with anybody out there. I think we have some world-class interviewers on the NewsHour, and I think what they do is thoughtful and smart and informed by facts, and I would put them up against anyone in our business, bar none. Tucker Carlson is a strange figure. He is such a... it may be waning now that the president seems to be trying to sink his ship, but he is an incredibly popular figure. Yep. In the conservative media ecosystem, and so people will go on to his program. And again, he talks to people for an hour. His podcast, his YouTube, since he's been booted off Fox News, that is an hour long. I watched recently the interview he did with Mike Huckabee in Israel, and it was, again, I would argue, not journalistically interesting. It was simply him trying to demonstrate that he could catch Mike Huckabee in circular logic and asking him about the Epstein files, for which Mike Huckabee, the ambassador to Israel, has nothing to do with. So I would argue that I wouldn't put what he does and what we do in the same basket necessarily. I understand the idea that he is a pugnacious and smart, articulate, and thoughtful guy. I also think he's too detached from reality.
Oh, fair.
We just ran a small clip of him echoing the idea that he believes that the moon landing had been faked all along. Again, he dabbles in conspiracy theories, and I think it's different than what we do.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So, one of the things that we're faced with, we know that there are news deserts in many of our communities. And there are different types of news organizations running in to fill the void, sometimes based at universities. Do you see a future where the news landscape evolves into something that's totally different, where universities and some of these other organizations are filling the gaps?
I mean, I could. I mean, journalism is a full-time job. It's
Yeah.
not something that's, I mean, it takes people who can dedicate themselves to also to learn enough about, you can have someone go and cover what's happening at your state house, but if they don't know what the history of a piece of legislation is, if they don't really know what the issue with that wetland that a corporation would like to redevelop is, if they haven't been steeped in the history and know what some of is going on in their community, a lot of what they might do is basic stenography of there was a hearing today and people argued about this and that. Yeah. So it is a profession. It is a full-time job that requires training. And if universities are training people to do that in their communities, great. I'm all for that. More power to it. We need more reporters in all ways. But it is not a dilettante. You can't just do it on every other Tuesday afternoon.
No,
that's not enough.
Absolutely. Would you ever go back to the classroom to teach
Oh, yeah.
next generation?
Yeah.
Okay. And is there anything in particular you'd want to teach them? Media ethics or anything else? What would be
Is this a job interview now?
It could be. It could be. So.
Watch, my boss is right there.
Well, she and I, we've actually done some work together. I don't know if she remembers it, but we actually have. So.
She just said I have no interest in academia whatsoever.
Oh,
that's my
enough.
final answer.
Yeah, no, that's great. So we've reached the point where we really have time for just one last thought from you. We sit here and you have a captive audience both here and online, and you think about your job and the responsibility of the media, what is the one thought that you would like to leave them with on your work and what the Free Press is doing in this country?
I think, and hopefully everyone that is here to listen to us would concur, I believe that the Free Press is a critical part of our society, and it is deserving of support. And that support can be a subscription to your local newspaper. It can be putting up a journalist when they come to your town because a tragedy occurred and the hotels are all booked. There's lots of ways that you can support media. Contribute to your local public television station. Become a friend of the NewsHour. Buy your local newspaper. Subscribe to magazines. The idea that we are okay with the slow diminishment of this industry and we think that we'll do okay with social media, it's not the same. It is a profession that needs support, and it is, I would argue, pushing back against some of the things that we don't like in our society, that expertise is okay, that celebrity worship is maybe gone a little bit too far, that worship of money and profit at the expense of lots of other things is not great. And journalism plays an important part in our society. And in all the ways that you can and do support what we all do, I would encourage you to keep doing that. Read it, watch it, critique it when you don't like it. Let us know what you think we are not doing enough of. Tell us what we ought to be doing more of. But stay engaged in that process.
Yeah. So our thanks to William Brangham from PBS NewsHour for being with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, really.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming today.
And for information about Commonwealth Club World Affairs membership and upcoming programs, please visit commonwealthclub.org. I'm Michael Bolden. Thank you, and take care.
Thank you.